Hello, beautiful souls. Have you ever noticed that the most dangerous moment in your life isn't when everyone is against you? It's when the most powerful people suddenly become interested in you? They don't approach because they admire your strength. They approach because they fear what your silence, discipline, and unpredictable mind could become. The world rewards the ordinary, but it studies the exceptional. Somewhere, behind closed doors, conversations about people like you are happening. Not because you're famous, but because you're impossible to control. Stay until the end, because today you'll discover why some people don't come to recruit you. They come to survive you. There is a strange silence that fills a room when people realize their usual methods no longer work. It is not the silence of peace. It is the silence of calculation. Eyes begin watching more carefully. Conversations become quieter when you enter. Smiles remain, but they feel rehearsed. Something has changed, and they cannot explain it. They are not trying to understand you because they admire you. They are trying to understand you because you no longer respond the way they predicted. That is the first sign that your greatest strength has nothing to do with power or status. It has everything to do with becoming someone who cannot be mentally owned. Most people spend their lives chasing approval. They adjust their opinions to fit the crowd, soften their personality to avoid conflict, and sacrifice their identity for temporary acceptance. This creates a predictable pattern. Predictable people are easy to influence. Their emotions can be triggered. Their fears can be exploited. Their decisions can be shaped without them ever realizing it. The world has always rewarded those who follow instructions without asking difficult questions. But every once in a while, someone quietly steps outside that invisible system. The moment you stop depending on applause, something unsettling happens. The people who once believed they understood, you begin losing confidence in their own assumptions. They expect anger, but you remain calm. They expect fear, but you remain focused. They expect you to defend yourself endlessly, yet you simply continue moving forward. Their greatest weapon was never force. It was prediction. Once they lose the ability to predict you, they begin losing the ability to influence you. Psychology teaches us that people naturally seek control over uncertain situations. Uncertainty creates anxiety, and anxiety demands answers. When someone cannot place you inside a familiar category, the mind works overtime trying to solve the mystery. That is why independent thinkers often become the center of silent observation. They are not louder than everyone else. They are simply harder to explain. True independence is often misunderstood. Many believe it means rejecting everyone or isolating yourself from society. That is not strength. Real independence is the ability to remain yourself even when surrounded by pressure to become someone else. It is walking into environments designed to reshape your thinking and leaving with your principles untouched. It is hearing criticism without allowing it to rewrite your identity. It is receiving praise without becoming addicted to it. People who rely on manipulation depend on emotional reactions. They know that guilt can force obedience. Fear can create compliance. Flattery can lower defenses. But what happens when none of those methods work? What happens when the person in front of them has learned to observe emotions instead of being controlled by them? Suddenly, the old strategies become useless. This is why emotionally disciplined individuals often make others uncomfortable without saying a single threatening word. Their calmness exposes panic. Their patience exposes impulsiveness. Their silence exposes insecurity. They become mirrors, reflecting truths that many people spend their lives trying to avoid. Most conflicts are not created by the strongest person in the room. They are created by those who cannot tolerate the presence of someone they cannot manipulate. Think about the individuals throughout history who changed industries, challenged traditions, or redefined what was considered possible. Before they were respected, they were misunderstood. Before they were celebrated, they were questioned. Society often labels independent thinking as arrogance because conformity feels safer than originality. Yet every breakthrough begins with someone willing to think differently despite the resistance around them. The strongest mind is not the one that wins every argument. It is the one that no longer needs to prove itself. There is incredible freedom in reaching a point where your confidence is built on evidence instead of opinions. You stop wasting energy convincing people who have already decided not to understand you. Instead, you allow consistency to become your loudest statement. That is when something remarkable begins to happen. The same people who once dismissed your discipline begin studying it. Those who laughed at your focus quietly wonder how you remained so steady while everything around you changed. They search for hidden secrets, special advantages, or invisible support systems because accepting the truth is far more uncomfortable. The truth is that your greatest advantage was never external. It was the decision to stop allowing other people to define the direction of your mind. Control only exists where permission is given. The day you reclaim ownership of your attention, your emotions, and your decisions is the day invisible chains begin to break. Not everyone will celebrate that transformation. Some will become curious. Others will become cautious. A few may even move closer, not because they wish to guide you, but because they are trying to understand how someone they once believed was easy to influence became the one person they can no longer control. Behind polished smiles and carefully chosen words, there is often a conversation that never reaches your ears. It happens in silence, where influence is traded, reputations are measured, and people decide whether someone should be ignored, challenged, or quietly brought closer. The unsettling part is that they rarely approach the strongest person because they want to help them. More often, they approach because distance has become too dangerous. The moment they realize they cannot predict your next move, curiosity transforms into caution, and caution slowly becomes an unspoken strategy. Most people believe attention is always a compliment. They assume that if successful or influential individuals suddenly show interest in them, it must be because they have earned admiration. But human psychology tells a more complicated story. People are naturally drawn toward whatever they cannot fully explain. When someone refuses to follow the expected script, they become mentally unforgettable. Your independence creates unanswered questions, and unanswered questions demand investigation. Throughout life, many people build influence by understanding patterns. They learn what motivates others. They know who responds to praise, who reacts to fear, and who can be distracted by comfort or recognition. These patterns become their advantage. But every system has a weakness. It struggles with the person whose decisions are guided by principles instead of pressure. That kind of individual cannot be redirected with ordinary tactics because their internal compass is stronger than external persuasion. This is why unexpected invitations sometimes appear after long periods of silence. Opportunities arrive from people who never noticed you before. Conversations begin with unusual compliments. Doors that remained closed for years suddenly open without explanation. It is tempting to believe the world has finally recognized your worth. Sometimes that is true. Other times, something much deeper is happening. They are not simply inviting you into their circle. They are trying to understand whether your presence will strengthen their position or quietly dismantle it. Psychologists describe uncertainty as one of the strongest sources of mental discomfort. The human brain constantly searches for certainty because certainty feels safe. When someone cannot categorize you, they experience cognitive tension. They collect information, observe your habits, and analyze your choices, hoping to reduce that uncertainty. Without realizing it, they begin investing more mental energy into understanding you than they ever expected. Notice how powerful individuals rarely reveal their true intentions immediately. Influence often arrives disguised as friendship, mentorship, collaboration, or opportunity. None of these are negative by themselves. Genuine relationships exist. Honest partnerships exist. But wisdom requires recognizing the difference between someone who values your character and someone who values controlling your potential. One seeks mutual growth. The other seeks predictable behavior. The most valuable asset in any environment is not money, popularity, or even intelligence. It is influence over decisions. Whoever shapes decisions quietly shapes outcomes. That is why emotionally stable individuals become so significant. They are difficult to pressure into choices that serve someone else's agenda. Their patience interrupts manipulation. Their discipline resists temptation. Their self-awareness makes emotional traps ineffective. People often underestimate the power of restraint. They believe strength is demonstrated by speaking first, reacting fastest, or proving everyone wrong. In reality, restraint forces observers to reveal themselves. While others rush to expose their intentions, the patient mind gathers information. It listens longer than it speaks. It notices inconsistencies others overlook. This creates an invisible advantage because knowledge collected in silence is often more valuable than opinions expressed too early. History repeatedly shows that remarkable individuals were approached long before they became publicly recognized, not because everyone suddenly believed in them, but because perceptive people sensed untapped potential. Some wanted to encourage it, others wanted to contain it. The difference between those two motives is subtle, yet life-changing. Encouragement gives freedom. Control creates dependence. As your confidence grows, the reactions around you begin changing in unexpected ways. Some people become unusually supportive. Others become strangely defensive. A few attempt to make themselves indispensable to your journey. They understand something many never realize. Once a person becomes mentally independent, influence over them becomes incredibly difficult. The safest strategy is to stand close enough to observe them rather than remain far enough to be surprised by them. Never mistake access for acceptance. Just because someone welcomes you into important rooms does not mean they understand your purpose. Sometimes people open doors because they believe proximity will give them an advantage. They assume that if they cannot stop your growth, they can at least monitor it. What they fail to recognize is that authentic strength does not depend on permission. It carries its own direction, regardless of who approves. The quietest transformation in life is also the most intimidating. It is the moment your identity becomes stronger than outside influence. From that point forward, every conversation changes. Every interaction carries new weight. Every opportunity reveals hidden intentions, and those who once believed they could easily shape your future slowly begin adjusting their own plans, not because they suddenly became your supporters, but because surviving the rise of someone they cannot control has become far wiser than standing in the way. Darkness never fears noise. It fears the one person who walks through it without losing direction. That is why the moment you stop chasing attention, the entire atmosphere around you begins to shift. You may not notice it immediately, but the people who once overlooked your presence suddenly become unusually observant. Their conversations become more cautious. Their confidence becomes more fragile, not because you threatened them, but because your existence quietly exposed something they spent years trying to hide. Every system built on comfort begins to shake when someone refuses to depend on it. The greatest disruption is rarely caused by rebellion. It is caused by quiet consistency. Most people expect change to arrive with dramatic speeches, public confrontations, or visible conflict. But history repeatedly proves that the strongest transformations begin in silence. A disciplined person who refuses to compromise their values creates more discomfort than someone who constantly argues. Why? Because discipline cannot be debated away. It can only be respected or feared. Every environment develops invisible rules. Some are written, while others exist only in the minds of the people who benefit from them. These unwritten rules determine who speaks, who remains silent, who receives opportunities, and who is expected to settle for less. Most individuals obey these patterns without realizing they exist. They adapt because acceptance feels safer than standing apart. But every so often, someone unknowingly refuses to participate. They continue improving themselves without asking for permission. They reject unnecessary drama. They refuse to compete for validation. Without realizing it, they begin disrupting a system that depends on predictable behavior. Psychology explains this through the concept of social equilibrium. Groups naturally seek stability, even if that stability is unhealthy. When one individual changes their mindset, habits, or standards, the balance shifts. Suddenly, everyone around them is forced to confront uncomfortable questions. If this person can overcome fear, what excuse do I have? If they can remain calm under pressure, why do I constantly react emotionally? If they can build confidence without approval, why have I depended on other people's opinions for so long? Most people avoid those questions because honest reflection demands responsibility. It is easier to criticize someone who grows than to admit your own lack of effort. This is why growth often attracts resistance before it attracts respect. Your progress becomes evidence that transformation is possible, and not everyone is prepared to face that reality. Notice how emotionally secure people rarely feel threatened by another person's success. They celebrate it because they understand abundance. Insecure people respond differently. Another person's discipline feels like a personal attack. Another person's peace feels like an accusation. Another person's confidence reminds them of everything they abandoned inside themselves. The discomfort they experience has very little to do with you. You simply became the mirror they never wanted to face. The strongest disruption comes from refusing to play emotional games. Imagine someone expecting you to argue, defend yourself, or seek revenge, only to discover that you remain focused on your own purpose. Their strategy instantly loses power. Manipulation requires participation. Without your emotional involvement, the entire structure begins collapsing. They prepared for conflict, but they never prepared for composure. This is where real influence begins. Influence is not forcing people to follow you. It is becoming impossible to ignore because your actions consistently contradict the limitations everyone else accepted. People begin asking questions they never considered before. They start examining beliefs they once defended. They become curious about habits they previously dismissed. Your example becomes louder than any speech could ever be. Throughout history, every remarkable thinker, inventor, and leader disrupted established systems long before receiving recognition. They challenged assumptions simply by refusing to accept that this is how things have always been. Their courage did not come from knowing they would succeed. It came from understanding that remaining average would cost them more than risking failure. There is something deeply unsettling about a person who no longer seeks approval. Approval has always been one of society's strongest forms of control. If someone can reward your obedience with praise and punish your independence with criticism, they influence your choices without using force. But when your identity becomes rooted in your principles instead of public opinion, that invisible control begins disappearing. People often mistake calm confidence for hidden power because they cannot imagine someone being so steady without secret advantages. They search for connections, resources, or lucky opportunities to explain your progress. Rarely do they accept the simplest explanation: consistency. Quiet effort repeated every single day eventually becomes stronger than natural talent performed occasionally. As your standards rise, the environment around you begins revealing its true nature. Genuine people become easier to recognize because they celebrate your growth without feeling diminished by it. Manipulative people reveal themselves through subtle resistance, unexpected criticism, or attempts to distract your attention. Your transformation becomes a filter. It separates those who value your evolution from those who depended on your limitations. Eventually, the disruption reaches a point where it no longer requires your presence. Your reputation begins speaking before you arrive. Your discipline becomes the story others repeat. Your resilience becomes the standard people compare themselves against. And somewhere behind closed doors, individuals who once believed they controlled every outcome quietly rewrite their expectations, realizing that the greatest threat to any system built on fear is not open rebellion. It is one person who becomes impossible to intimidate, impossible to distract, and impossible to convince to become anything less than their authentic self. The most dangerous battlefield is the one no one else can see. It exists behind your eyes, where fear negotiates with ambition, doubt whispers louder than logic, and every weakness waits for the perfect moment to take control. Most people lose this war long before life presents its greatest challenges. They surrender their thoughts to panic, their emotions to circumstances, and their decisions to the opinions of others. But there comes a rare moment when someone quietly closes every door to outside influence. That moment is where ordinary people disappear. and someone truly untouchable begins to emerge, people often misunderstand what it means to be untouchable. They imagine power, wealth, status, or physical strength, but history has repeatedly shown that all of these can be taken away. Empires collapse, fortunes disappear, titles lose value, physical strength fades with time. The one thing that remains almost impossible to steal is a disciplined mind. Once your thoughts become your own, manipulation loses its favorite weapon. Every manipulator depends on emotional predictability. They expect anger when they insult you. They expect fear when they threaten you. They expect insecurity when they compare you to someone else. They build their entire strategy around the assumption that your emotions belong to them. The moment they discover you respond with observation instead of reaction, everything changes. Suddenly, the script they rehearsed no longer works. Psychologists often describe emotional regulation as one of the strongest indicators of long-term success. It is not the absence of emotion. It is the ability to experience emotion without allowing it to become the driver of every decision. Imagine standing in the middle of chaos while everyone else is controlled by panic. The calm person immediately gains an invisible advantage because they continue thinking while everyone else is simply reacting. That kind of composure is not something people are born with. It is built through repeated moments of discomfort. Every disappointment teaches patience. Every betrayal teaches awareness. Every failure teaches humility. Every setback becomes another layer of emotional armor. While others search for easier paths, mentally strong individuals allow difficult experiences to reshape their character instead of destroying it. One of the greatest psychological traps is the need to prove yourself. Society quietly teaches people that their value depends on convincing everyone else of their intelligence, success, or importance. But the truly untouchable person understands something different. Every unnecessary explanation gives away energy. Every argument invites distraction. Every attempt to satisfy critics places your confidence in someone else's hands. Silence, when supported by confidence, becomes incredibly powerful. It forces other people to fill the empty space with their own assumptions. They begin revealing their intentions without realizing it. Some expose jealousy, others reveal admiration, a few demonstrate fear. Meanwhile, you gather information simply by refusing to interrupt the process. Observation often reveals more truth than confrontation ever could. Strategic thinking also separates emotionally disciplined people from everyone else. Most individuals focus only on immediate comfort. They choose temporary pleasure over lasting growth. They sacrifice tomorrow's opportunities for today's convenience. But someone developing an untouchable mindset constantly asks different questions. What happens if I stay consistent for 5 years? What skills will matter when everyone else gives up? Which habits quietly compound while nobody is watching? These questions create extraordinary results because success rarely comes from dramatic moments. It comes from ordinary actions repeated with uncommon discipline. The outside world eventually notices what the inside world has already been building for years. Another overlooked characteristic of psychological strength is selective attention. The human brain cannot focus on everything at once. Every distraction steals attention from something meaningful. This is why successful people become extremely protective of their mental environment. They choose what they read. They choose who influences them. They choose which conversations deserve their energy. They understand that attention is one of the most valuable resources they possess. The people who once believed they could manipulate you begin noticing subtle differences. Their criticism no longer changes your direction. Their compliments no longer inflate your ego. Their rejection no longer destroys your confidence. Instead of controlling your emotional state, they become observers of it. For someone accustomed to influencing others, this shift feels deeply unsettling. True confidence is remarkably quiet. It does not demand recognition because it no longer depends on recognition. It does not seek constant reassurance because it has already survived uncertainty. It does not chase every opportunity because it understands that patience often produces better outcomes than desperation. This quiet confidence becomes magnetic, precisely because it is so uncommon. As your emotional discipline deepens, your decisions become increasingly difficult to manipulate. You begin recognizing emotional traps before they are fully set. You notice hidden motives behind flattering words. You detect pressure disguised as opportunity. Most importantly, you stop confusing urgency with importance. Not everything demanding immediate attention deserves your response. Eventually, the strongest realization arrives. Becoming untouchable has never been about making other people fear you. It has always been about reaching a level where fear no longer governs you. The moment your mind refuses to be purchased by approval, shaken by criticism, or distracted by temporary temptations, you become the kind of person whose greatest advantage cannot be seen, measured, or controlled. And that invisible strength quietly forces even the most influential people to rethink every assumption they once made about you. Every scar carries a question that the world never bothers to ask. It asks whether you survived, but it never asks what your pain taught you. Hidden beneath every disappointment is a silent decision. You either allow suffering to become the architect of your excuses, or you force it to become the engineer of your strength. Most people unknowingly choose the first path. They relive old betrayals, repeat old fears, and carry invisible chains long after the people who hurt them have disappeared. But there is another kind of person, one who walks through darkness without denying its existence, quietly collecting every painful lesson as if it were another weapon no one else thought to carry. Pressure has a strange effect on human nature. It does not create character, it reveals it. When life becomes comfortable, almost anyone can appear confident, generous, or disciplined. Comfort hides weaknesses beneath routine. But the moment uncertainty arrives, masks begin falling away. Some collapse beneath the weight of criticism. Others become consumed by anger. A few spend years blaming circumstances for every missed opportunity. Yet there are those rare individuals who look directly at adversity and ask a completely different question. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" they ask, "What is this trying to teach me?" That single shift in thinking changes everything. Psychology refers to this as cognitive reframing, the ability to assign a new meaning to difficult experiences. Two people can face the same betrayal, the same failure, or the same rejection, yet leave with completely different futures. One sees proof that the world cannot be trusted. The other sees training that sharpened judgment. The event remains identical. Only the interpretation changes. The people who eventually become impossible to defeat rarely live easier lives than everyone else. In many cases, they endure greater hardship. Their advantage comes from refusing to waste suffering. Every disappointment becomes information. Every failure becomes feedback. Every insult becomes evidence of where emotional control still needs improvement. They stop measuring life by comfort and begin measuring it by growth. Notice how extraordinary performers in any field develop resilience. They do not wait for confidence before taking action. They build confidence through repeated exposure to discomfort. The first attempt feels terrifying. The second feels awkward. The 10th becomes familiar. The 100th becomes instinct. While others avoid pressure because it feels unpleasant, disciplined individuals quietly adapt until what once intimidated them becomes ordinary. Criticism follows the same pattern. Many people spend enormous amounts of energy trying to silence critics. They argue, defend themselves, or desperately seek approval. But criticism often contains unexpected value. Even unfair criticism forces you to strengthen your emotional stability. It teaches patience when immediate reactions would create regret. It teaches discernment because not every opinion deserves equal importance. Some criticism reveals areas for improvement. Other criticism reveals the insecurity of the person delivering it. Wisdom comes from learning the difference. Opposition also has a hidden purpose. Resistance creates strength in ways comfort never can. Muscles grow by resisting weight. Minds grow by resisting limitation. Character grows by resisting temptation. Every meaningful transformation in life requires pressure, because pressure exposes weaknesses that convenience allows to remain hidden. Many people unknowingly give their opponents too much power. They allow one negative comment to overshadow 100 positive actions. They replay painful conversations while forgetting years of progress. Their attention becomes trapped inside problems instead of possibilities. The mind naturally focuses on threats because it evolved for survival. But successful people train themselves to direct attention towards solutions. They acknowledge pain without allowing it to become their permanent identity. Imagine someone attempting to discourage you, expecting disappointment to slow your progress. Instead, every obstacle makes you more disciplined. Every rejection pushes you toward greater preparation. Every setback forces you to improve skills you previously ignored. Eventually, your greatest advantage becomes impossible to understand because the very attacks designed to weaken you became the source of your growth. History is filled with individuals who achieved remarkable things not because life protected them, but because life demanded adaptation. They discovered abilities they never knew existed precisely because circumstances left them no alternative. Comfort rarely reveals potential. Necessity almost always does. This transformation also changes the way you view success. Instead of chasing recognition, you begin chasing mastery. Instead of comparing yourself to other people, you compare today's discipline with yesterday's habits. Instead of fearing failure, you begin fearing stagnation. Growth becomes addictive because each challenge reveals another version of yourself waiting beneath the surface. The remarkable part is how this mindset affects everyone watching from a distance. Those who once expected you to quit become confused by your persistence. Those who predicted your failure struggle to explain your progress. They search for shortcuts, secret advantages, or lucky opportunities because they cannot accept the simplest truth. Consistency under pressure creates extraordinary results over time. Eventually, pressure loses its ability to intimidate you. Criticism loses its ability to distract you. Opposition loses its ability to define you. Every difficult experience becomes another layer of wisdom, another source of discipline. Another reminder that the strongest people are not those who escaped hardship, but those who learned how to transform every wound, every obstacle, and every moment of doubt into fuel that keeps them moving while everyone else slowly runs out of reasons to continue. The shadows become strangely quiet when they realize they can no longer follow your footsteps. There comes a moment in every extraordinary journey when people stop asking whether you will succeed and begin wondering how far beyond them you are willing to go. That silence is unsettling because it marks the end of who you used to be. The version of you that needed permission, feared rejection, or waited for perfect timing no longer exists. In its place stands someone whose greatest weapon is not power, but presence. A presence that cannot be bought, distracted, or intimidated. The highest level of transformation is never about becoming famous, feared, or admired. It is about becoming someone whose character speaks before their voice does. Reputation is built on what people say when you leave the room, but character is built on the decisions you make when no one is watching. Most people spend their entire lives protecting an image. Very few dedicate themselves to building an identity that remains unshaken regardless of circumstances. There is a reason emotionally mature people command quiet respect. They no longer chase every opportunity simply because it looks impressive. They no longer react to every insult because they understand not every battle deserves their energy. They recognize that attention is limited, and every unnecessary distraction steals focus from a greater purpose. This level of discipline often confuses people who measure success through constant activity. They mistake patience for weakness until patience begins producing results they cannot imitate. Psychologists describe respect as something fundamentally different from approval. Approval depends on agreement. Respect depends on consistency. Someone may disagree with your choices yet still respect your discipline if your actions consistently reflect your values. This is why the strongest individuals rarely change direction every time public opinion shifts. Their principles become the foundation upon which every decision is built. When your life reaches this stage, something unexpected happens. The people who once underestimated you begin changing the way they speak about you. They become careful with their assumptions. They stop expecting emotional reactions because experience has taught them otherwise. Some quietly begin studying your habits. Others attempt to understand the mindset behind your decisions. They are no longer looking for your weaknesses. They are searching for the source of your stability. One of the greatest indicators of personal evolution is the disappearance of unnecessary conflict. Not because the world suddenly becomes kinder, but because your judgment becomes sharper. You recognize manipulation before it gains momentum. You identify distractions before they consume your attention. You understand that proving yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you is one of the greatest wastes of energy imaginable. The remarkable thing about wisdom is that it changes your definition of victory. Earlier in life, winning may have meant defeating someone else, proving critics wrong, or receiving recognition. But deeper growth replaces those ambitions with something far more meaningful. Winning becomes maintaining your integrity under pressure. Winning becomes protecting your peace despite chaos. Winning becomes remaining faithful to your purpose when shortcuts appear more attractive than discipline. There will always be individuals who misunderstand your confidence. Some will call it arrogance because they cannot imagine self-belief without ego. Others will assume your calmness hides secret advantages. They struggle to accept that genuine confidence is built slowly through thousands of private decisions. Every morning you chose discipline over excuses. Every evening you chose learning over comfort. Every setback became another opportunity to strengthen your perspective instead of surrendering to frustration. The most respected people rarely announce their strength. They demonstrate it through consistency. They arrive prepared. They keep promises. They remain dependable during uncertainty. They refuse to compromise their principles for temporary rewards. Over time, these ordinary actions accumulate into an extraordinary reputation. People begin trusting them not because of impressive speeches, but because experience repeatedly confirms their reliability. Influence naturally follows this kind of character. Not the shallow influence measured by popularity or applause, but the deeper influence that shapes decisions, inspires courage, and creates lasting change. Others begin seeking your perspective because they recognize something rare. Your advice is not driven by ego, fear, or personal gain. It is grounded in wisdom earned through experience. Ironically, this is the moment external validation loses its importance. You no longer need constant recognition because your purpose provides direction. You no longer fear criticism because your values provide stability. You no longer compare your journey with someone else's because you understand that every meaningful path unfolds at its own pace. This freedom becomes visible to everyone around you. They notice that your confidence remains unchanged whether the room applauds or remains silent. As your character continues to mature, opportunities arrive with increasing frequency. Yet your standards also become higher. You learn that not every invitation deserves acceptance. Not every alliance deserves trust. Not every impressive title deserves your attention. Discernment becomes one of your greatest strengths because wisdom teaches that protecting your mission is often more valuable than expanding your influence. Eventually, the transformation becomes undeniable. The same people who once questioned your direction begin measuring their own decisions against the example you quietly set. Those who underestimated your resilience now recognize that your greatest achievement was never reaching a higher position. It was becoming a person whose mind cannot be manipulated, whose principles cannot be negotiated, and whose presence quietly commands respect wherever life chooses to place them, leaving even the most influential observers with only one conclusion. Some individuals are never meant to be controlled, only acknowledged.